Okay, so first, before we start talking about your dad, I want to talk about you. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, what you do at your company, the book you've written. I want to show a short little video about it. It's fascinating and it's so entertaining and so much fun. You go ahead. Thank you for joining us, by the way, too.
Well, it's my pleasure being here. I'm Andrew Schiff. I run the marketing and communications for Capital, which is a financial brokerage firm, most known because my brother Peter Schiff runs the firm, and I've been the communications and marketing director there since 2008. Before that, I was an independent media consultant. I did public relations and writing for a lot of other people, and Peter was a client of mine from 2003 to 2008. He was relatively a lot smaller. He just had an office in California. Europe Pacific Capital just had one or two offices in California. Then we opened an office in New York and Connecticut, and we went nationally. When we opened the office in New York, I started working with Peter full time, and he hired me as the marketing director for the firm, and that was 5 years ago. So basically, what I do is I handle all of everything you see out of Europe Pacific Capital, the videos, well, not the videos, but the written materials, the commentaries, the digest, a lot of Peter's radio show. I've worked on all of our special reports and I put the newsletter out myself, essentially. I helped Peter write some of the books, some more than less. The last book, Real Crash, I didn't very much work on, but before that I did. I was a co-author of How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes, which is an update of a book my father wrote 30 years ago. It was an update and a very large expansion of the book and kind of a reimagining of the book. And to a certain extent, if you ask me a lot of what I do, I tell them I help run the family business, which is trying to spread the word of Austrian economics and limited government and libertarian ideals. The company, Europe Pacific Capital, kind of puts that into effect through investing. We have a very specific investment philosophy that is tied to the economic philosophy, which Peter represents very well on CNBC and Fox Business. Not on Bloomberg TV. Bloomberg TV banned Peter like 3 years ago. I don't know why they refused to have him on. And every time it's very funny. Every time there's a new producer, it's funny. They hire a new person there at Bloomberg TV, and we'll get a call. Oh, I want Peter Schiff, and I'll say, okay, great, we'll book Peter Schiff on, and they'll book him, and then of course 20 minutes before or an hour before he's supposed to go on, they get a call. Oh, I'm sorry, we've got to cancel. Some breaking things have come up. Can we reschedule till next week? I'm really sorry, and then we'll never hear from them again. That's happened literally 4 times.
Wow.
For some reason, Bloomberg doesn't want him on air. And that's what I do. I mean, if you are familiar with the website of Europe Pacific Capital or the written materials we put out, you're familiar with my work. Other than that, I live in New York. I have a wife and 2 children, and I enjoy living in the city. And I do a lot of other things, but that's what I do for my money. But to a certain extent, it is advancing the Schiff family legacy, because my father, who is in jail for his beliefs, was for my father pretty much almost exclusively, and he mirrors my father in a lot of ways. He's a lot more practical than my father. My father was kind of a Quixote figure who was ready to tilt at any windmill he could find. He had plenty of opportunities to charge more windmills, but he paid the price for that, and he's in jail for a long stretch, and he's a courageous man, extremely courageous man. You could call it foolish, depends on your perspective, but that's where he is. And my brother has taken my father's ideas and put them into practice on a more of a practical level with a firm. That's done very well. And so it's my job to try to get those ideas out to the larger media and the larger world, and we've been successful. Has become a nationally known figure, and the fact that he can be very provocative and kind of being a bomb thrower. My job, to a certain extent, is to try to, a lot of people see a person like Peter, especially from the mainstream, they think he's just a provocateur. He's not serious, and it's my job to try to present him in the most serious light. and try to get the facts out there in as compelling and as neutral and as nonpartisan as I can to make these ideas simply, persuasive and not.
I think you do a good job of that because, the firm's widely respected and, you're important to that whole thing. I feel like what you do, the job you do is very valuable and difficult and stressful at the same time. I don't know that I could handle all of those things.
The personalities will remain nameless, but there are, it's not an easy thing to do to balance some very explosive personalities. And the media business, I can't say I really have much respect for it because I don't. These people, they're not persuaded by arguments. They're persuaded by politics. They're not persuaded by, they're not. A lot of them aren't very intelligent. In a lot of ways, it's pointing that these are the people who give us news and are trafficking our ideas. Oftentimes, it's like high school, and it's just like not what you would imagine it to be. These people who are controlling or who are the gatekeepers to our most important airwaves could be petty, could be they have a herd mentality. They can't think outside the box. They're not ever comfortable with going against the herd, and they're not very creative. And Peter in particular, gets very upset that these people refuse to see, give him the respect that he wants, or give him the ideas of respect that they deserve. But it's like they're not going to back a horse that's the long shot. Everyone wants to back the favorite, and if you're not the favorite, it's a popularity contest. So yeah, that's it.
I actually I had the privilege of interviewing Ben Swan, and he actually said some of the same. Ben Swan, the journalist, heard of him? Ben Swan. He's actually reports on things the way that we would see them. Says the truth regardless. My son is screaming. Hold on just 1 second. Answer some questions from the room. Read the chat. I'll be back. 2 seconds.
My son is a vet. That's the kind of guy I am. Okay. Does the media try to pick who the favorites will be? Yeah. And sometimes, it's the funniest thing. I mean, I'll deal with some like producers from television, and they'll call me. I mean, these are people I've been dealing with for 5-6 years, who are working for the CNBC or Fox Business, and they'll ask me like, okay, do you have someone who can talk about X subject? And they'll say, what is her? And I've been on television time myself. What do you think of like, the Fed QE3? Will that help the economy? And I'm like, have you listened to a word we've said for the past 8 years? Do you have any idea? I mean, you're a producer from CBS for CNN, CNBC. You should know what position that we take. When they're just trying to plug in the dots, they say, I got this debate on, I want someone who's going to say X, and they want someone who's going to say Y, and they have no idea. I've talked to business producers for CBS News, ABC News, major reporters. I mean, I've talked to reporters for the New York Times who don't know, they basically come out of journalism school, they've gone to the best schools, they've gone to Yale, they've gone to Princeton, they've got a master's from the Medill School of Journalism in Illinois. They know what they're doing, but they've never really been exposed to ideas that are outside of the academic mainstream. And to me, it's shocking they haven't really done the research. And so I'm not familiar with Ben Swan, though. You're going to tell me something a little more about it.
Someone linked to him down below. You could take a look at him, offline once you get done with this. He's really actually amazing. He's an affiliate of Fox, which I find is interesting.
He's like from Ohio or something like that, right? The Midwest. He's a local. I've seen a couple of his YouTube clips. Yeah, that guy was good. I mean, I was very impressed. I saw that guy, and I said, and I even forwarded that link to somebody within the movement saying, this is a talent you should keep an eye on. This guy was pretty good. I see a question here from someone, how well did my dad know Aaron Russo? He didn't know him that well. He certainly knew him a little bit better towards the end. I mean, Aaron Russo died about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe 6. And when Russo was making his film From Fascism and Freedom, he spent a lot of time with him. My father was very impressed with Aaron. And he did a lot of those interviews before my dad went to jail, which was in 2005. And my dad's pretty much been in jail since 2005. So he had nothing but good things to say about him. I know he had an interesting career before he got into the tax movement. Bette Midler, he produced Trading Places, which if anyone listens to the Peter Schiff show, you know that Trading Places is Peter's favorite movie, or one of his favorite movies. And, you know, interestingly enough, Aaron Russo was the producer of Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd. So I thought Russo did a pretty good job with From Freedom to Fascism. And, you know, it's too bad he died so young.
You need to now tell us about your dad. Tell us what happened. You know, explain a little bit of what's going on with him, because we want to help you get him out of where he is and into.
There's really, well, this is where it stands right now. My dad got a 13-year sentence plus 1 year for contempt of court, and this was in 2005 trial in Las Vegas, Nevada. The contempt of court was because my father, in a brilliant gambit, in a move that no one could have suspected, decided to represent himself at trial. Ooh, that really worked out. And, you know, my dad, he's a brilliant man, but, you know, his faith in himself was unlimited. I mean, I guess anybody who has that kind of, who wants to take on the federal government has to have an ego the size of Yankee Stadium. And my father certainly does, or did, and still does. And, you know, I probably would have preferred if he took his foot off the gas pedal a little bit, especially toward the end. Because again, when he was lost this 2005, that was the third time, actually the fourth time, if you want to be technical, the fourth time he was convicted of a tax crime, and the third time he was sentenced to jail. So, you know, he should have known that. And my brother and I are very. My father likes to second guess himself and say, if he would have done this and not that, if he would have done a lot of things, he would have won. And the fact of the matter is, there's no way he could have won. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, when you're meeting, you know, a power like the federal government and its power to tax, it doesn't matter how much law you have on your side. It doesn't matter how much persuasiveness you have on your side. You're going to lose unless you have a lot of power behind you. And if you're a lone individual. And my father, to a certain extent, was an idealist. He really thought we're still living in the country of James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, a nation of laws, not a nation of men. Which, I mean, frankly, is just any casual look at United States history is going to disabuse you of that notion. It's pretty clear that we're a nation of politics, and might pretty much, you know, makes right. And he was going to lose that trial, and probably, you know, the fact that he had represented himself and treated the judge with contempt. I mean, actual contempt. And to be honest, the judge deserved it. I mean, the judge was petty. He was, and I followed the trial very closely. He was vindictive. He was prejudicial. He refused to allow my father to put on a real defense. He was all these things. And my father, you know, that got his blood up, and he was very fiery in that trial, and that cost him the sentence. And if you don't think judges take it personally and are vindictive and putting a big sentence on you, you're wrong, because people, and they don't like to be messed with, and if you mess with them, they'll mess with you back, and they've got the power and you don't. So he got a 14-year sentence, and he was 75 when he was sentenced. You know, we requested the time to be served at Danbury State, Connecticut, which is near New York, and Connecticut, where my brother lives. But of course, the judge didn't realize that the Danbury prison, which was a minimum security prison, was now an all-women's prison. So he served his time mostly in different facilities, primarily in the Northeast. But for the past 5 years, he's been in Terre Haute, Indiana, which is 100 miles from here, or 800 miles from here. And they moved him there because they say the medical care is more convenient, or it's more appropriate for an inmate of his age. Now, the bottom line is the medical care there stinks. It's not good at all. The only reason he's there is because there's three federal prisons in Terre Haute. One of them is super maximum security, one's a medium security. So they have a large number of inmates. So they have a pretty good deal with the local hospital. So there's more established medical procedures there. But it's no better than where he was. He was in a place up in the Catskills here in New York about 4 years ago. It was very convenient for us to go visit him, and now it's forget it. You got to either fly to Indianapolis and rent a car, which is no fun and it can be expensive, or what we did this weekend, we got in my brother's RV, 7 of us, and thank God for Paul Maresca. If any Schiff fans out there know Paul Maresca, Paul is one of the people that produce the Peter Schiff show. He's basically Peter's personal assistant and does a lot of the sound. He lives in Connecticut. He works on the campaign, Senate. And thank you, Daniel, for donating for Irwin Schiff, by the way. And he was the driver of the RV. I drove it about a third of the time. Peter didn't drive it at all. You don't want Peter driving your RV, trust me. And we went all it's probably a 16, 17-hour drive to Terre Haute. We stopped we took my 2 kids and Peter's son and Peter's fiance. We stopped to go whitewater rafting in Ohiopyle, Pennsylvania on the Youghiogheny River, which was very fun. I'd recommend going on the lower. It's a beautiful, beautiful river. We stopped at some my brother's fiance, Lauren. She has some family in Shelbyville, Indiana. We stopped there. And on the way back, we stopped at Hershey Park in Pennsylvania for the kids and rode some coasters. But we saw my dad and for a full day on Monday. And it was a very nice visit. He has deteriorated physically since the last time I saw him about 6 months ago, and mentally too. One of the reasons why I think he's deteriorated so much is because prison in Indiana has no air conditioning except for the common areas, the mess hall, visiting rooms, and like the library. The inmates' quarters don't have air conditioning. Now, anyone who's been in the Midwest recently, especially Indiana, it's been over 100 degrees there every day for the past probably 20 or 30 days. And I had to walk through the inmate areas to get to the visiting room. And it's not a very secure prison. So you pretty much just walk in. Stiflingly hot. I mean, stiflingly. Like, I couldn't take it for 5 minutes. You know, obviously I could have if I had to, but I couldn't leave. But, I mean, I wanted out of there. And my dad's 84 and not in good health. And, you know, anybody knows that heat and age don't go well together. So we're trying to get him transferred out of there to a better facility with him. But I will tell you this, that dealing with the Bureau of Prisons and dealing with the Justice Department has no interest whatsoever in letting him out of prison one day earlier than they could possibly keep him there. Bureau of Prisons has no interest whatsoever in making his stay any more comfortable than it has to be if it involves anybody doing any work. It's completely impersonal, totally bureaucratic, and the only thing they will respond to is political pressure. And yes, is he a political prisoner? Yes, obviously he's a political prisoner. Well, look, my dad could have done a million things to stay out of jail. I believe he could have criticized the government all he wanted to and stay out of jail. But my dad wanted to take the whole system down. He wanted to slay that dragon, and he wanted to be St. George. And to a certain extent, it's not like trouble came looking for him. He went looking for it, and he found it. Doesn't mean that my dad wasn't a brilliant guy. He certainly was. He certainly is. But at this point, you know, he's 84. You know, he doesn't pose any more threat to the government. If he does get out, he's not in any position to resume his activities. And at this point, keeping him in jail doesn't serve anybody's interest. And we're doing a couple things. We have a lawyer that's just filed what's called a 2255 motion that's saying that he wasn't represented effectively on his appeal. And it's a very, very strong motion because essentially, and I can get into this, my dad was not allowed to present a good faith defense at his trial. And his appellate attorney did not raise that effectively in his appeal. And my dad couldn't raise the fact that, most of his conviction, the vast majority of his time, was given as a result of fraud. Now, fraud means you have to actively defraud someone, cheat someone from their money. And basically what they said is my father was taking money from people that he was selling his books, record tapes, and seminars to. He was making money from people by telling them they don't have to pay taxes. in a sense, he was defrauding them. And in order to be guilty of fraud, you have to believe that you're cheating people. If you just sold someone a product that you thought was good, you really thought was good, but it turned out not to be, then you're not guilty of fraud. You have to lie to be guilty of fraud. And my dad has never lied a day in his life. Probably the most honest guy I've ever met. Certainly the most courageous, very, very honest. To a fault, honest to a fault. And they had to say that he didn't believe any of this stuff. They had to convince the jury that he was just a huckster. And my dad tried to put on a good faith defense, saying, look, I believe all this stuff. Obviously, I've written 3 books about it. There's no one you can ever produce that can make to tell that I don't believe this stuff. And by the way, I can produce government witnesses, ex-IRS agents, judges, and a long list of people that have written things, that have supported my opinions. I've researched this stuff, written 5 books about it. I believe all of it. They wouldn't allow him to present any of that stuff at trial. Basically, the judge said, you cannot argue jury law to this jury. I, the judge, will instruct the jury as to what the law is. The law clearly states you have to pay taxes. Not only that, Mr. Schiff, you knew you had to pay taxes because in previous trials you were convicted. So if you were convicted of tax crimes, you knew what you were doing was illegal. So therefore, it's already been established that you're a fraudster because you knew what you were doing was illegal, and you continued to go and represent to your clients that you could avoid pay, that taxes were unconstitutional. You're guilty of fraud. He couldn't introduce his books. He couldn't introduce his tapes. He couldn't cross-examine government witnesses about any matter of law. And any attorney that he hired would have said, look, he was not allowed to put on a big defense. He couldn't, whether you believe he's right or wrong about taxes, he had the right to argue that he was not lying to people. But the attorney that he hired, of course, go ahead.
What made him decide to represent himself?
One word: hubris. Because in his world, nobody knows. He thought he was going to win. He thought he was going to win on the law. He was going to convince the jury that his interpretation of the law was the correct one, and that all the judges and the IRS had all incorrectly interpreted the law to a certain extent. Or that the law was not that he was actually following the correct interpretation of law, whereas the government was not. And he wanted to win on those arguments. Now, his arguments are very, very persuasive. My father literally lives the tax code. God help me why he does. As far as I'm concerned, you only live once. You don't want to spend it with your nose buried in a tax code. That's me. Obviously, people are different. He knew the tax code really well, and he wanted to go in there and argue on the code, on the law, and win on the law. He didn't want to win on a good faith. He didn't want to win that he believed the laws were correct and that it doesn't matter if his interpretation of the law is right or not. He didn't want to win like that. He didn't want to win that he was crazy, so therefore he's not guilty of fraud. He wanted to win on his issues, on the law. And he did not believe that he wanted to live for the right reasons, for the reasons that mattered. And since a lawyer would not know the law as he knew it, and was not prepared to argue those points, because in truth, lawyers who have raised those in courts have been fined by the government. They're not even allowed to raise those issues. They were scared. Now, he could have won. I think if he had a lawyer, he could have won. He could have won on a good faith defense. He wouldn't have won on the issues he wanted to win on, but he could have won, and he could have avoided jail. I think 99.9% of the people in this country would have taken that bet. I would have, certainly. I
was just about to say, he's obviously a man of principle, and obviously, after going through what he'd gone through several times earlier, was just there to accomplish something, and his goal ultimately, don't mind them, his goal ultimately was to beat the system, and he was not successful, sadly. But you got to give him credit, though.
He was swinging for the fences. Didn't matter the fences were not away, but were 4,000 miles away. I mean, no matter how hard he hit a ball, he wasn't getting it over that fence. I mean, it's possible It's possible with the right jury and the right judge, they would have given him a fair trial. It's possible. It certainly wasn't probable. And, you know, there's a lot to it. I mean, yes, he made the courageous choice, but at the same time, his family had to pick up the pieces to a certain extent. And, you know, ask yourself, I mean, what's the right call to do? You know, it's not so cut and dry. Everyone thinks you want to go down with a blaze of glory and all guns blazing. But, you know, life isn't that simple. It's not a movie. There's always the next day. And, you know, if it were me, I don't know what I would do. You know, I like breathing air. I like, you know, seeing my children, watching my I mean, that's me. Everyone's got to ask themselves. But don't think that the decision is that the courageous choice is the easy is the one. It's so simple. It's a little more complex than that.
I definitely agree with you. How is he holding up? I mean, you know, what was his reaction after he got his sentence and he realized what he was going to have to go through?
He, you know, he doesn't sink in. He always thinks that he's going to win. You know, my brother and I, the joke that we have with one another is the same thing from back in the earliest, when he started his court case, probably 1977, 78. He's been doing this for 30 years, professionally fighting the government. And every time he would write a motion, and he taught himself law, and he taught himself tax, he taught himself everything. And every time that he would, he'd say, "I got them just where I want them. Oh, they're going to go. When they see this, they're going to cry. They don't know what they've got them just where I want." So I'm sure when the sentence came in, he'd say, no, I got it now. Now they give me 14 years. Now they're really going to pay. And I don't think until maybe 3 or maybe 5 years ago that it's sinking that he's in jail for a long time and that he might not get out. And I think that scares him. It scares him. And now he's 84. So I think I was saying the heat in Terre Haute. I mean, heat and old people just don't go together. And it's been wickedly hot out there, and it's taken a lot out of him. And he's walked slowly, very doddery, and he's having trouble with some mental faculties. He's had trouble with his memory. And it's a shame that, you know, that the system is so impersonal, because it really is. If you've ever known anybody in federal prison, even if it's minimum security, I mean, it's the worst. I mean, they won't tell us anything. The only way we know anything about what's going on with him is because inmates call us and say, you know what, your dad's in the hospital. You know what, your dad's had this problem, X problem. They don't, the prison, they don't take care of him. They don't care of him. The only people who take care of him are the other inmates who are in for whatever crimes. They're not in crimes. Mostly it's drugs or whatever. The people in minimum security prison they're not scary. They're just like people, and they're good. A lot of them are very good people, and they take good care of my dad. I walked in there this weekend. There are 3 prisoners there who, you know, basically take complete care of him. And he's an old man. He requires a lot of care. Some of it's not very savory. They do it. The prison couldn't be bothered.
Well, I mean, this leads me to my next thing. You know, I'm on the planning committee with Paul Festival, and we were talking about your brother and his interview he had on our you know, ticket-a-thon that we had one day, and he spoke about your father, and we said, we're going to have this gathering of all these people. What can we do as a movement to help you guys out? Like, try to do.
This is what we can do, and we figured out what we can do. The best way for him to get out, we have a motion pending. And to give you an example, when we're trying to get him a new appeal, and all of these appeals go through his original judge in his original jury trial back in Las Vegas. And this guy has no interest whatsoever in letting Irwin Schiff out one day more than he could possibly do. And he's been delaying and not ruling and delaying, and we have to force him to act and force him to rule by going over his head. Guy's essentially rotting in prison, and the judge could care less. But we found out that in order to get him out for what's called a compassionate release, you know, not granting him custody, not granting him a pardon, but just saying, look, this guy's an old man, and, you know, he doesn't need to be in jail anymore. We're going to give him a compassionate release and allow him to serve out a sentence in home confinement. And he'd be at my brother's house, which is, you know, pretty nice place to be if you've been to Westport, Connecticut. And to do that, we found out that we have to, and we're still hoping the appeal is going to work, but that might not work. The compassionate release, it has to come, the Bureau of Prisons has to request that the judge, the original judge, which is Judge Dawson in Las Vegas, grant the compassionate release. And that letter has to come from the Bureau of Prisons. Now, I've also heard the Bureau of Prisons writes those letters. You know, we have our country right now has a lock 'em up mentality. There's been laws passed, and it's, you know, and that's part of the legislative fix that you don't, especially on the federal level. I mean, it's interesting. In California, murderers get out in 10 years because they can't have a place to put the prisoners in jail. At the federal system, the good time. You serve your whole sentence. The most you can get off on good time is 15%.
Didn't they just let that terrorist out of prison overseas and brought him back here or whatever? The one who was really sick with cancer and.
Not the one in Libya.
Yeah,
Well, that was in Europe. You know, the guy responsible for the Lockerbie bombing, he had cancer, and they let him go. But in the federal system, the states is different. The federal government, they're not going to let you out. Not only that, the federal government. This is an interesting point. Get conjugal visits. Not that my dad wants conjugal visits, but you get 30 years in the feds, no conjugal visits. You get in the state, they'll let you visit your wife. But it's just an interesting sidebar. But if the Bureau of Prisons were to write the original judge requesting that they grant a compassionate release, that would carry a lot of weight, especially given Kent Dawson's particulars. I don't want to go into it, but Dawson has recently gotten into trouble for supposed leniency in a case involving a tax scam in Las Vegas for a person associated with his son. So if he would have to be lenient to my father to dispel favoritism if the Bureau of Prisons were to make the request, which is a high hurdle to go to. I mean, the Bureau of Prisons, especially in a Democratic administration, again, the head of the Bureau of Prisons is a political appointee, so there'd really be no incentive for them to do it. If the Republicans in charge, there might be, primarily because Peter Schiff has some political pull. And, you know, if enough senators, congressmen were to get involved and were to impress upon the Bureau of Prisons, who would be led by Republican Mitt Romney were to win, then there's possible that they would write such a letter to the judge. I think in that event, the public can play a part by influencing congressmen and elected officials to get involved, especially from Indiana. I know Murdoch, who's been on, I forget his first name, the Republican challenger, who beat Richard Lugar in the primary. He's been on my brother's radio show a couple times. My brother has gotten to know him. If he were to win, he would be a very strong advocate. Obviously, other people in the libertarian movement and libertarian senators, congressmen are in our camp. So I think if those people, especially in a Republican administration, where there's a Republican head of the Bureau of Prisons, could be prevailed upon to write such a letter to the judge. You don't have to say Irwin Schiff was right about taxes. You don't have to say there was conspiracy here. You don't have to say that anything except one thing. This guy's 84 years old, 85 years old. He's a nonviolent offender. He's got very bad health. It's kind of a victim crime because he was really he was not defrauding anybody. He stood up for his principles. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe you think he was misguided. But he's essentially harmless. He served 7 years, 8 years. Let him go.
Everybody here, your family has done so much for this movement and has been so successful. And I don't know, I personally have never seen you ask all of us out here that are very vocal and very, very powerful for help. And I've got a room full of people right now going nuts asking what they can do to help your family. And we actually started an online petition and we started a Facebook group.
I see that somebody just posted Kent Dawson's number, and I'll just say one thing. Be very careful. Dawson Threats will get you nowhere and only harm the situation. If you're going to write a letter to Dawson, it has to be the most respectful tone you can muster. Because one of the reasons that I think that my father got such a stiff sentence is because that courtroom was packed with people who were very pro-Irwin and were very quick to cry foul and to heap scorn of the judge. Not that the judge didn't deserve it. Of course, he probably did. But if you're going to say to the judge, you might as well be working with the union. You might as well be working with the czar or the Star Chamber. That's just going to make him mad. When you get a guy with a lot of power, you make him mad, he's going to use it. You're not going to shame him. He's put beyond shame. It doesn't work. But if you threaten them, they're just going to get mad. So if you write to Dawson or you call Dawson, I would not recommend calling Dawson. And actually, I wouldn't even recommend to do it. If we were to get, what would really happen is if the Bureau of Prisons were to write such a letter, that's when public pressure would really work. But for the meantime, what we're trying to get him, and maybe letters to the Bureau of Prisons might be successful, because what we're trying to do right now in the near term is to get him out of Terre Haute. Nothing against Terre Haute. Well, actually, got to be honest, I've been to Terre Haute a few times, and sorry, people, if you're from Terre Haute, not the greatest place in the world. With the exception of the Indiana Theater, they have a very old movie theater in downtown, built in the 1920s and 30s. Some people there are trying to restore it to its former glory. All they're not getting any money from the citizens.
There's a few people down here that are from Terre Haute, believe it or not, and they're saying we know it stinks. It's horrible.
Well, do you ever the Indiana Theater? The people that bought it, private people. I got a tour while I was just poking around. Believe me, there's not much to look around, and unfortunately, it's all chain restaurants. Who needs that? And I got a tour of this theater, and these people, from their own money, are restoring it. It's one of these 1920s movie palaces. So beautiful, and they're fighting the elements. The ceiling's caving in. They're having a hard time, but they need your support down in Terre Haute. We're trying to get them transferred to a place. What?
I said, but who will build the roads?
Yeah, you've been in the theater. It's a great place. I think they do occasional midnight movies there. They're trying to program. We're trying to get them transferred to a place called Devens, Massachusetts, where there's a higher level care facility for federal inmates, like more of a prison hospital situation. And that's in Massachusetts, closer to certainly New York and Connecticut. And so it'd be great to get them there. It's not like in a garden spot of Massachusetts. It's like maybe an hour and a half west of Boston, near the New Hampshire border. That would be an improvement. So writing letters to the OP, I know I've heard Irwin Schiff is in really bad shape. Right now our lawyers are trying to get him transferred to Devens, Devens, Massachusetts. We're trying to get him transferred there. So, maybe letters to the Bureau of Prison, transfer Irwin Schiff to Devens. It can't hurt. And if he's there, he could better, maybe it's a little cooler. And it's easier for Peter and I to get. And my grandchildren, his grandchildren. I have visions of grandeur here. I'm one of those people that shoots for, the mountaintops instead of starting at the bottom level. And I know that, 100,000 of us writing letters could really kind of make a difference, don't you think? Well, as they say here in New York, couldn't hoit. And my father would do that too. My father, if you ever met Irwin, has a real Borscht Belt sense of humor. His favorite comedian was Henny Youngman. And in fact, at his house, he has a wall full of trophies from prison talent shows, in which he had his old Henny Youngman routines, joke routines. He's also a great magician, my father, card tricks all night long, and great dancer. People don't know that. Irwin Schiff, king of the mambo, king of swing. And you put on a Benny Goodman watch out. Not so much his dancing and his tennis has really fallen off recently. But he was a very entertaining guy, and he always won his prison talent. Getting into Devens would be a nice first step.
I'm sorry. Is there any way for us to actually go there and interview him in person?
No, before when he was back in jail in like 85, 86, the first time he was in jail, reporters could show up. He did tons of radio shows from prison. Almost daily, people would call him. He'd do a radio show. They clamped down on that stuff big time. This is not the same country as it was. I mean, I remember visiting him in 85, 86, and I visited him in 91. These were always minimum security places. I remember the quality of places that I went to see, and it's nothing like that now. The days club fed, they used to call it club fed, and it was to a certain extent not true, but the places weren't bad. Now they're awful. I mean, there's nothing like it. So you can't even visit them unless you're. You can get on an approved list. You could write a letter and say, Irwin, Mr. Schiff, I'd love to visit you. Can you give this information to the prison? Got to get on the approved list. They got to check your background to make sure you've never convicted of anything. And then they can say, okay, you're approved. And then you can visit them if you're on the list. And you'll have to write, you say, excuse me, okay, you are on the list. It's not easy. They don't make it easy for you. And then visiting hours are Friday through Monday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. No, sorry, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. That's the deal. And you have to be there all day and eat their really crappy vending machine food, which is not good.
I guess that's a small price to pay. I mean, can you provide the information for the people we need to write to, or can you give that stuff?
Well, you can write to him at FCI Terre Haute Satellite Camp. His number is 08537-014. That's 08537-014. Now, the great thing about the federal system is that was the first number he ever got in 1982. And they kept it for him the whole time. So every time he'd leave jail and come back, they'd have his number for him. They kept it safe. Really nice of them, conscientious. That's his number. If you write to him at Terre Haute, at Mr. Schiff, I'm a big fan. I'd like to come visit you. And you ask him to put my name on the approved list. You can do that, and he can write you back. Although he's not. Problem is he's got really bad eyesight. One of the things that these guys, I told you about these guys that take care of him. One guy reads all his email and reads all his mail because my father can't do it. They haven't given him the glasses. He can't see anymore. So they got a guy who reads his mail for him and responds for him. His hearing isn't great. His vision isn't great, but his tennis. Boy, what a wicked forehand, and his net game. Just kidding. He used to be decent at tennis. So my father is, he was really, and the funny thing about my father is, like, when you say to Peter, well, Peter was very good at what he's at Austrian, but it makes sense that Peter was because he got it from Irwin. The question is, where did Irwin get it from? My father was born in a very kind of a classic immigrant family, Jewish, blue-collar family, New Haven, Connecticut. His father was an immigrant. His mother was an immigrant. He was one of 8 children. And he grew up in the 30s and 40s. And those people, his whole family, his whole milieu, I just used the word milieu, was Democratic, Roosevelt, New Deal. He went to college in 1950, studied economics, when the dominant economic school of thought, the textbook by Robert Samuelson, was a very left-wing Keynesian textbook. That's what everybody believed. I mean, Austrian economics was the province of John Birchers and Ku Klux Klan people. Nobody of any seriousness, certainly anyone from the Northeast, certainly someone who was Jewish, would not gravitate towards that sort of economics. But my father did, and that's the big mystery. And he read the stuff. He read Hayek. He read Mises. He read Henry Hazlitt, and he read these people when he was 21, 22 years old, and he recognized the logic and the truth of it. And he said, "This is what I believe in." And everyone was like, "Irwin, what are you doing? Who needs you? Hanging out with the John Birch Society? What are you, crazy? You lost your marbles?" And he did. And so that's kind of the black sheep event for the Schiff family, that Irwin did this. And then, Peter learned in the car like I did. My father, from the time I was 6 years old, I'm the younger brother. When I was 5 years old, he thought it'd be really fun, really important to teach economics to his kids. Personally, I was never quite as enthusiastic as Peter was about it. about the economics. A lot of other things I like. Economics is, up there, but maybe not number one. Peter is number one. Anyway.
I mean, just talking to you I'm like touched. This is a really amazing story because of how brave your dad was and how steadfast he was in his beliefs, even if it might not have been the smartest route to go per se. He just is locked into his beliefs, and I can't do anything but thank him.
I mean, when he was in, he had a pretty good run in Las Vegas. He got out there in 1991 after he got out of jail, and he was there in 2005. And he was as provocative as he could possibly be. I mean, he was just daring the government to come after him. He had a big sign, why pay income taxes if you don't have to? Off the sign. He had a 30-foot sign that he had built. He would lead marches onto every April 15th onto the federal building. He'd have, 500, 600 people. He'd call the media. He'd make news. He was waving that red flag in front of that bull as hard as he could. Yeah, he wanted to change. He wanted to spark that revolution. And it's a very admirable, not for everybody. It certainly caused some hand-wringing and pain, difficulty for my family. As a father, when I was growing up, his obsession was taxes. His obsession was, soccer games. It was taxes. I'm a father myself. Kind of hard to sacrifice your relationship with your children. I wouldn't do it.
I was just going to ask you actually how old you were when he first went to prison the first time. How old were you?
When he first went to prison, I was 15. And he would have gone to prison a couple of years before that if it wasn't for a kind of a reversal, and he was convicted and the conviction was reversed and he was convicted again. So he would have gone to prison when I was younger, but he got delayed. The first time he started writing about taxes, I was probably around 8. And he would drag me to all the seminars. I'd be 10 years old and I'd be the guy in the back selling the books and collecting the money. So his idea of summer vacation for me was, driving around to seminars. I'd be selling the books in the back of them. So
this is like what I'm putting my kids through right now. So I totally sympathize because I do the same thing. It's what I'm passionate about, and I care so much about it. And, what does your dad think about, do you know, if he has any thoughts about where we're at right now as far as liberty in this country? Is he thrilled? Is he, apathetic? What?
He's pretty, he's pretty pessimistic as is Peter. And, he doesn't feel good about it. Obviously, when you're in federal prison, the worst thing about federal prison, by the way, is the guards. Generally speaking, they're not very nice people. Some of them are, but most of them aren't. So he's, he's still, the funny part is he still clings to this idea that, that law, the rule of law will prevail. And that if you find the right statute and you show it to the right person, they'll say, you know what? You're right. There it is. Oh my, we've been wrong. Thank you, Irwin Schiff, for pointing that out. In the back of his mind, he still thinks that's going to happen.
Do you think that if it doesn't come from a court, but it comes from people like us that are successful, he'll appreciate it just as much, or do you think he needs the validation from?
Write him a letter. He will read it, or more accurately, somebody will read it to him. Say, Mr. Schiff, you're an inspiration. I think your sacrifice is worth it. I think you'll inspire future generations. I've read all your material. I love it. And I think I just want to say thank you. Believe me, he's going to read that, and it's going to make a difference.
That's good to know. That's really good to know. It's just an amazing story. We have plans, and when we get started on something, how come you haven't said anything to us in the past? We're all out here, the grassroots that love liberty and freedom and hate taxes.
What's your question?
I haven't heard a plea from you guys. Please help us. Our dad's in prison. Can you help us? Write letters. Do this. Do that. Why?
Because I'm just a realist. People can write him a letter and he'll read it and it'll make him feel good. Their political pressure, as I said about the whole letter to the BOP, especially if there's a Republican administration and appoints a Republican to head the BOP, because it is a political post. Then, yeah, something can happen, possibly. But, even then, I mean, no one wants, the Republicans themselves are not going to want to look like they're coddling tax protesters. It's not the way the world works. I mean, I'm a little bit more of a realist, So, I mean, I appreciate the support. I just don't, I don't want to, say to people, yeah, you get a million people to write a letter. It's gonna spring them out of jail. I just don't. I mean, I've been around the whole thing. I've seen how the justice system works, and they have no interest in taking it easy on them.
Well, I'm going to hopefully prove you wrong, and so are all of us.
I see people saying I don't agree with my dad. It's not the question of whether I agree or not. I just didn't think that he was going to win because I just, you study history. When you study history, you see that, power works in a certain way. And it doesn't get shortcutted by anything besides greater power. And, one person working outside of the system cannot diffuse and unwire an apparatus that is so huge. I mean, it's kind of a fantasy we have while watching movies. You have all these heroes that go into this machine and just, take it apart from the inside, and they're the heroes. It doesn't really work that way.
So just from your own personal, just from your personal perspective, what would you rather? Would you rather all of us who care so much about this write a letter to your dad telling him how proud we are or would you rather we write to the politicians and the judge and whoever else, the Bureau of Prisons?
Well, Peter's talking to Rand Paul, talking to Ron Paul, we're talking to this guy, Jim Murdoch. There's a couple of other libertarian members of Congress. I mean, this guy Justin Amash out of Michigan. I mean, of a congressman or senator that you think might be sympathetic. Tell them we're reaching out to Rand Paul's office to let Rand know that there's other people that are supporting him, and put as much political pressure on the BOP as we can. BOP is the Bureau of Prisons. And again, right now the Bureau of Prisons it's run by the Democrats. So to a certain extent, who's actually sympathetic? He's not in Congress anymore, but Dennis Kucinich was actually fairly sympathetic to us, but he's not there anymore. Just as a civil libertarian, Democrats could be helpful to anybody really to say, look, this is just ridiculous. And this is an old guy who took a principled stand against taxes. He wasn't trying to defraud anybody. He's not a Bernie Madoff. He's just a guy. Was he a little fanatical, a little nuts? Yes. I mean, my dad has got.
Which one of us is it? I'm nuts a little bit, I think. I don't know. I mean, a lot of us.
Absolutely. I mean, not that his ideas were crazy. His vision of the world is just overly romanticized. That he would see reality in the face. Irwin, there's a train coming down the tracks at 40 miles an hour, and you're standing in the middle of the tracks. Don't worry, I'm going to stop it. I have this thing. I'm going to put it in front of the train. It's going to stop. Irwin, it's not going to work. The train's going to go right through that thing. It's going to hit you. Oh no, yes it will. You have to be a little bit, you have to be a little, I wouldn't say nuts, but you have to be a little bit.
Unleashed.
You don't see reality for it. Yeah, no, you're not really seeing reality for what it is to do that. That's why most people don't do it, because they see that it's not going to work and you're going to get thrown in jail. So that's what happens.
I got to say, I'm going to open up the floor for questions in a second. But I have to say, you've done such a great job tonight of explaining your dad and his personality. And, I could tell how proud you are of him, even though you might be a little bit disappointed in some ways.
I'm only disappointed that my children don't have a relationship with him. My children could have had a relationship with him. And I think he's a great guy. And it hurts me that my children don't have a relationship with him. I think he could have been as effective, actually, yes. I think he could have been as effective in fighting his fight in a different way. He was going for, and he wanted a little bit more glory. I mean, and the glory is subjective, and we also should not forget that. I mean, there is always an element of personal, of glory that people want. And my dad wanted to be the guy that took down the David that slew the Goliath. Romantic image, certainly a vision of personal redemption that was very seductive, and that's what he wanted. You know, I can fault for that. But I think he could have fought his fight in different ways that would have involved less risk for himself. And I probably would have preferred that. And if that means that people think that I'm, too wishy-washy, or I don't appreciate a sacrifice, or I'm not a true believer, or I'm not worthy of the cause, well, you know, sorry. You know, let your dad go to jail for 15 years, then we'll talk.
I got to correct Liberty Lakeland. He never said it was his ego. He's trying to describe, and I can see this because
Look, the question is this. You know, I'm saying that he could have fought his fight. You know, he researched this stuff for years. Could he have raised these issues in a way that was less risky to himself personally, but would not have the possibility that with one fell stroke, with one brilliant victory in court, he was trying to undermine the whole system through a legal victory, through legal vindication in federal court. That's what he was looking for. That was the path of the most personal risk and the greatest payoff. I think he probably could have fought the fight in ways that were less risky. I do think going the path that he did chose, to some extent, was by ego, by his desire for maximum victory. And to do what he did, you know, to not take legal counsel. I mean, seriously, to fight for your life without the assistance of counsel, thinking that you can do it better than any lawyer. If you can sit there and tell me that ego is not involved, then I think, you know, you're not really looking at the situation the way it is.
I appreciate your honesty. And do you have a few more minutes?
I'm saying risky. The book part wasn't part, even though they unbelievably determined that his last book, The Federal Mafia, was a piece of commercial speech, and outrageously banned that book because they said it was all commercial speech and not political speech, which even the Writers Guild of America came down with a very strong amicus.
He's lagging a bit. I think he locked up.
Me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you locked up for a split second. You can.
But I'm saying the part about him challenging them in court and the way he challenged them is, and especially by making his business, you know, I'm going to sell you books and tapes, I'm going to charge money to people in order to tell them how they can stop paying taxes. That was very risky. And, you know, I mean, again, waving that red flag in front of the bull, thinking that you're not going to get hurt. If you think that I'm somehow a Judas calling that driven largely by ego or ego, so sorry to be a party pooper, but there it is. Yeah, the problem.
I'm gonna keep you for about.
The problem with getting a lawyer is they don't understand. That's exactly what Irwin said. He understood better than the lawyers wouldn't have argued his case. They wouldn't have argued the way he wanted to do it. They wouldn't have argued the tax issue. But maybe they would have kept him out of jail for 15 years.
One person down there is asking if there's any way you could provide the exact information of who at the prison bureau we need to write to if we wanted to write. And I
don't know. I mean, attention to that. I'm not sure. I could probably, you know, you could attention bureau of prison, you know, medical director. I don't know exactly who would go to, who's making decisions about transferring inmates. You could write to your congressman. Maybe they can help find out for you. I don't know. We're going through a lawyer right now to try to get transferred to Devens, Massachusetts, which is where he wants to go. So I don't really know there, but I think, you know, write the Bureau of Prisons and, you know, regarding Irwin Schiff, 08537-014. That's his number. You know, get him to. We know that he's suffering greatly from the heat in in Terre Haute, and he needs to get out of there. It's not right that you're leaving this old man to the elements.
That's got to be so hard for you. Like,
but yeah,
I mean, if it was me,
again, my dad's been going to jail since I'm 15 years old. I'm 47. I've gotten used to it.
Yeah, but now he's older, and you know.
He's old, but, you know, things don't change that much. He's been in jail for a long time. Anyway, I should get going. I'm in my bedroom. I know my wife wants to go to sleep. So, but we just saw him a couple days ago. You can write to him. Again, you can get on his, you can get on his visitation list, especially if you live in Terre Haute. You have people in Terre Haute. Really easy. Just write to him. Say, I want to get on your, I just want to say hi. I'd love to be honored to come meet you. He's got to get you, ask the BOP to put you on their visitation list. But if you don't have a criminal record, there's really no reason why they can take you off. And you can go visit them.
Andrew, thank you so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. And I just have a quick question.
Yeah, well, I want to say one last thing. You know, I wrote this book, How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes, Peter and I, and that was an update of the original How an Economy Grows and Why It Doesn't. It'd be interesting to compare those two books if you ever get the two of them side by side. Also, his first book, Irwin's first book, The Biggest Con, which was written in 1972, has nothing to do with taxes and only to do with economics. If you want to get a real clear shot of his economic thinking, get a copy of The Biggest Con. It's a fantastic book. It really is beautifully written. I mean, beautifully written, very scholarly, and I'd recommend. You can get it on eBay. You know, there are copies around.
Andrew, are you going to come down to Paul Festival and hang out with us?
I don't know. Depends on people. You know, if the company pays for me, I'll probably come. If not, you know, my wife and I have a place up in. We rented a place in Connecticut in August, and that's going to be my vacation. I don't know if I'm going to come down. Peter's certainly going to be there. I might be there. It depends on how things shake out. I'd like to, but we'll see. Okay.
We would love to have you. Thank you so much for your time again. I hope I talk to you soon.
Take care.
That was an amazing, amazing hour, I have to say. That was one of the best interviews I've ever had, and he was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guest. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Have a good evening, and please, if you know anyone who hasn't seen this, we're going to focus the strategy a little bit more, and we'll get that out in the near future, within the next few days. Paul Festival wants to help Irwin Schiff and his family, and we're going to do that. So keep your eyes peeled for that stuff, guys. Thanks for watching. Spread the YouTube video around, please, and talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.